What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're doing FPL transfer tips ahead of Game Week 37. As always, going to take a look at the transfer market, see who's being brought, who's being sold, what mistakes are being made, and which players might be brought in instead, and all that good stuff. So please do give it a like, hit that subscribe button. Videos coming out a little bit earlier so I can fit in another one later. Then I've got a couple more tomorrow as well. Lots to come ahead of the Game Week 37 deadline. So give it a like, and I'll jump into it. Okay, so Jesse Lingard first. 38,000 transfers already, but I know there's a lot of people considering this move kind of just come to the end of the tether with Jesse Lingard because he's just not been performing as well as he had been. And I think there's probably two types of people. Either one, they got on early, got all the points, and now they're happy to jump off. Or two, they didn't get all the points, a bit like me. Then they brought him in. He's done pretty much nothing since. And now you're frustrated with him. The stats don't look too good. 0.82 expected goals over the last 6. 0.53 expected assists. Only 6 shots in the box. 1 shot in the box on average over the last 6 weeks is pretty poor. He does have 2 good fixtures left, though. West Brom away and Southampton at home. Really, really decent fixtures. I know West Brom only conceded 2 to Liverpool, and one of them was an Alisson goal. But having watched the match, there was quite a few times where Liverpool could have got in behind. West Brom's line, I thought, the defensive line was quite high, very close to the halfway line. Just that final ball into Mane and Salah in particular just wasn't ever really there. And in fact, West Brom probably did a better job getting in behind the defence for their first goal than Liverpool did. And I think we've seen this from West Ham before. It might be a bit different with Antonio back in the side, but remember the game against Leicester, for example, Lingard on the shoulder, Bowen on the shoulder, and they did really well. And I think that could work pretty decently against West Brom. So for me, it's all about prioritising your transfers. When you look at the rest of your team, is Jesse Lingard the highest priority player to sell? A lot of people will have Lingard and Jota. Therefore, you just keep Lingard and you just make the Jota move instead. This comes back to my rule at the start of the season. Don't force players out. If you've got something better to do, Lingard can just stay. He's been frustrating, but it is what it is. Like, if I have a look here, he scored 1 goal against Newcastle, which was a penalty. He's done nothing else in the last 5 games. And obviously before that, look, this is just him overperforming before. We said it all along. I still went for him anyway. He was never going to keep that up, but obviously that's obvious. No player ever keeps up scoring forever. He's just coming into a bad patch now, but he has played Chelsea and Brighton in that run, which are both 2 tough defences. He scored against Newcastle, even though it was a penalty. Then Burnley and Everton, a little bit frustrating, I think, not to get anything there, especially against Everton, to be honest. But with the 2 fixtures, I think he's a luxury transfer. That's what I would boil it down to. If you've really got nothing else to do, then you could bring in someone like Harrison or Rafinha if you wanted to go for a Man City punt. But I think with West Brom away and Southampton at home, you can easily just leave him in and prioritise elsewhere. So I'm going to say, overall, he's a keep. But you might have the luxury in some of your teams to get rid. But I personally wouldn't be massively encouraging it, I don't think. Okay, so lots of people looking to sell maybe Lingard and obviously Jota, looking to go for Greenwood. 78,000 transfers in already. And obviously I can't say that he's a bad pick. You look at the numbers, expected goals are decent. The amount of shots he has in the box is decent as well. And he is one of those players that when he's in and around the goal, he is just going to shoot, right? You think of like, I don't know, Firmino, for example, he's much more likely to look for a pass. Although I know he scored 2 goals in a match recently than Greenwood, right? He gets in front of goal, left foot, right foot, he doesn't care, he's going to shoot. So I like him for that kind of purpose. And obviously a lot of people eyeing up Fulham at home versus Wolves, then Wolves away. I guess the only problem with Man United is how much rotation will there be in the last 2 games? And I think it's difficult to call. One thing I will say, and I know this advice kind of applies every week, and I probably say it every week, try not to make your transfers until as late as possible, especially this week, right? Think about what happened last week. People bought in Man City players early, and to be honest, I was very surprised by the team they went with. But we got that info before the deadline, pretty much anyway. And the first 2 games of this week are Leeds versus Southampton and Man United versus Fulham. And so therefore we might get some kind of indication, early team news before the games start, which then indicate or kind of steer our transfers in a different way. And I think it's likely that Greenwood starts against Fulham, but as I've said a few times, right now I'm not convinced he starts the Europa League final because Fred and McTominay would certainly be the pivot. I think Pogba will play on the left, Fernandes in the middle, and Cavani up front. I definitely think Cavani's getting saved for the final. Then there's one space on the right for Greenwood or Rashford. And Rashford, when he's fit, is pretty much nailed. The only way that Greenwood definitely plays that final as well is if Solskjaer goes for a pivot that includes Pogba. So Fred and Pogba, McTominay and Pogba, whatever it might be, with Rashford, Fernandes, Greenwood, and Cavani up front. And because of that, I'm not 100% sure which of these two games Greenwood might get rotated for. We saw in the Game Week 35 double that he has got the legs to kind of start quite a few times and still come on. He's obviously very young, so he could start Fulham, where I do think it's more likely that the Solskjaer plays a pivot that includes Pogba. And then 38, obviously, is just going to be a kind of free-for-all like it is all week. So I like the Greenwood transfer in, but I do have maybe slight doubts about whether he starts both of these games. But to be honest with you, I have those doubts about any Man United player. And so if I had to bet on someone playing twice, it probably would be Greenwood. Because I think in 38, most of the players that are going to start in the Europa League final will probably be rotated. And I'm not convinced Greenwood's one of those starters. But otherwise, if he does play against Fulham, stats are looking good. He looks like a good transfer in, fairly cheap. There aren't many better options, I would say. So another player being quite heavily bought, Trent Alexander-Arnold, 44,941 transfers in already. We already know the fixtures are good. Burnley away, Crystal Palace at home. What's interesting about the Burnley game is I think Dyche has said something like he's not expecting too much from the players. They're safe at this point. They're currently lying in 15th place. It doesn't look like they're going to, well, they can't be relegated now anyway, right? So it doesn't really matter where they finish. Obviously, there's a bit more prize money the higher up you finish, but Sean Dyche has obviously done well with a squad like he has with the limited budget, so he's not going to ask for too much from them. And also, if Pope is still out, then Peacock Farrell's going to play in goal, and that could be good for Liverpool too. Now, obviously, Trent's a defender, but if you watch that West Brom game, it was kind of ridiculous how, not just how far forward Trent was, because we see that all the time, but just how often. He was everywhere in that game, and I thought he looked really good. And I'm kind of between two schools of thoughts, because on one mind, I'm thinking you could take a hit, right? If you've got some defenders that got really bad fixtures just through bad planning or unfortunately because of the blanks and the doubles, you kind of got caught out, or if they've got injured and you've got the money to go to Trent, I think he is one of the only defenders that could be worth a hit for the last two games of the season. On the flip side, West Brom scored, and they probably should have scored again as well. I think that goal from the header where I can't remember who was offside, but kind of in the way of the keeper, but there's no way the keeper was getting to it anyway. So I feel like it probably should have been allowed. So they could have conceded twice to West Brom, but Burnley away and Crystal Palace at home are pretty decent fixtures. Saying that, obviously Crystal Palace as well have been scoring goals recently, like putting 3 against Villa, but I wouldn't let that change my thinking too much because the Villa defence isn't great. So for me, I really like this transfer in. I've owned him for a while. He's been brilliant. Even when he didn't get a clean sheet yesterday, he still came away with 6 points because he got the assist and the bonus. And he's definitely getting at least 1 clean sheet out of these last 2, maybe even 2. And the attacking threat looks decent. Like, you look at this, 1.83 expected assists and 0.66 expected goals. Combined, that's over 2. That's more than Jesse Lingard over the last 6 matches. And this guy gets you points for clean sheets as well. I think he's looking brilliant at the moment. I guess he's playing for an England place as well because there's no guarantee that he gets into that. So yeah, really good buy. No doubts about it in my mind. If you couldn't get him in because of Jota as well, you've got the chance to free up a spot now for Liverpool. And I do think in some situations he's worth a hit. So yeah, big thumbs up for me. Definitely keep buying Trent. So I talked about Watkins last week. I was tempted to, or I did say to keep him because I thought Grealish was going to be back and starting, which I obviously got wrong. But Watkins did come away with some points against Crystal Palace, which was decent, especially when Calvert-Lewin, Bamford and Antonio all did nothing. So well done if you kept Watkins. But now is probably the time to sell him. Until we hear from Dean Smith, I don't know whether Grealish is going to start the next game, but they are ramping up his minutes slowly. Obviously, the injury was probably, he was out for a while, so it must have been bigger than we first thought, or Dean Smith and co first thought. So there's no guarantee he's even back. Spurs away and Chelsea at home and no pushovers. So yeah, definite sell for me. There's no question about it. Again, you have to prioritise your transfers, okay? If you've got Jota and Watkins and you don't want to take a hit, then obviously you prioritise Jota. But I think we are almost at a point where you could take a hit. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in the game week preview later on. But obviously the less matches you've got, the less chance there is of making up that hit. So I wouldn't completely write Watkins off if you've got Jota instead to sell. But yeah, options are not unlimited, but there's a few options you go for. Cavani, but I do think he at best plays Fulham and gets a sub appearance against Wolves. There is no way that Cavani starts both the last 2 games. So if you bring him in for 37, which I do think is a really nice differential move, you have to keep in mind you're going to have to either play a midfielder or a defender instead of in 38, or probably transfer him back out, because I know he can do stuff from the subs bench, but there's no guarantee he comes on against Wolves, because he will be saved for the final. And you don't want to rely on players for 15, 20 minutes. Okay, for some players like Jota, for example, he gets a lot of points and he gets the odd bench appearance. Yeah, he can get points, but for this particular one, you've only got 2 transfers left, 2 weeks left. Cavani, you need to know what you're doing in Gameweek 38. Otherwise, it's Bamford or Antonio for me. I think if you didn't already get Calvert-Lewin in, you just ignore him now. He's only got Wolves and then Man City. That's not easy at all. For me, this week has slightly changed my opinion on Antonio and Bamford, in that Bamford probably is going to get reduced minutes going forward. Hopefully, obviously, he makes it to 60 minutes next time. I do still think he gets 2 starts. Again, like Man United I spoke about earlier, Leeds are playing at 6 o'clock on Tuesday, so we might get some kind of indication of early team news. But I think just because of the quick turnaround and the fixtures, I still just about prefer Bamford. But if you are concerned about his minutes, just go for Antonio. There is so little to compare. Like last week, the only real reason I went for Bamford was because of the Burnley game. That's gone now. They both play Southampton and West Brom to end. I'd probably just go for, I don't know, probably still Bamford just about. But if you think minutes are bad, go for Antonio, and that's it. Otherwise, I don't think there's too many other strikers to choose from. Chris Wood looks good in Game Week 38, but for Liverpool, Game Week 37, I just wouldn't go there, especially when Dyche is saying that he's going to not let his players off, but he's not expecting as much from them. Ian Atcher, there's no point in bringing him in now. Che Adams, but again, he's got to play Leeds and West Ham. It's not easy, I would say. Wilson's out as well, so I'm not really seeing too many punts. I wouldn't go for Ings. Firmino, that is just punt territory, I think. I just think there's better Liverpool options. So yeah, for me, it has to be Antonio or Bamford. I wouldn't argue against either of them. Bamford, I think, is the better option. All minutes the same. If you think minutes are now a concern, just go for Antonio. But Watkins can definitely be sold. Okay, so Jota, I left till last, even though he's probably one of the biggest talking points this week. He's already been transferred out by 216,000. The reason for that is I'm going to do a Game Week preview video later where I'm going to go into replacements in a little bit more depth, but I will talk about them now. Obviously, the purposes of this video is to analyse the transfer market and talk about whether people are making a mistake in terms of buying, selling, holding on to a player or just completely ignoring them, whatever it might be. And in this case, obviously, yeah, he's a sell. But for some teams, right, and I think of my own team when I talk about this, you might have a good front 8 where, for me, for example, I could sell Jota and play 3-5-2 because I'm going to bench. I don't want to play Iheanacho against Chelsea, basically, right? So I could sell Jota and bench Iheanacho, or I could sell Iheanacho, get Cavani in, or Antonio, or Bamford, whoever it might be for your own team, and just bench Jota. Now, there's a couple of reasons why one might be better than the other, right? Obviously, if you sell Iheanacho and keep Jota, that's one less player on your bench. You also don't free up a Liverpool spot. But if you think the striker options are better than midfield options, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Ideally, you want a good playing squad for 38, because who knows what the hell might happen with players getting rested and stuff like that. And we have to remember as well that players have played a lot this season in weird conditions, playing a condensed schedule, right? And all these fixture changes too. And now they've got to go and play the Euros. Managers are going to, for the teams that got something to play for, it's a little bit different. But for those that don't, managers might protect their players a bit more. So going into 38 with a good squad could be decent, but I still don't think you have to sell Jota. If you do, there's loads of options, right? Man City players, I'll talk a bit more again in the preview video. I don't want to put everything off to that, but I think they might be worth avoiding. Rafinha and Harrison look decent from Leeds. Really good fixtures. Southampton, then West Brom. Right now, without having looked into it hugely, I still think Rafinha is the better option. I think Harrison is a lot of hindsight bias now, or recency bias, because he's just done really well. He is a really good option. I just think Rafinha is better. Jota, who we already talked about, they are probably the main candidates. If you've got a lot of money in the bank, Gareth Bale is an option if you want to chase a bit of a differential. Getting straight back up to Fernandes is another option as well, although some of you might have to take a hit to do that. But Jota is a definite sell. For me, the Leeds boys, I just think their fixtures and their price are so good. I certainly wouldn't be going near West Ham or anything like that. So yeah, Rafinha for me. Harrison, if you want to go off the more recent results. Greenwood looks good as long as he starts. I'd really want to just double check that against Fulham. And yeah, other than that, you have to get more money. So Son or Bale against Villa look pretty good. But again, I'll go into the options in a little bit more detail in the game week preview. But Jota, obviously, he's a sell. So there we go. That is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Please do give it a like and hit subscribe if you're new around here. If you missed it in the video where I mentioned it like 100 times, I will be doing a game week preview video later. And then tomorrow I'll have team selection. I'll probably just put captaincy in the preview video rather than do a separate one. There just isn't enough time. And then we'll have a deadline stream tomorrow as well. So yeah. Lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff to come. So yeah, give it a like, hit subscribe. And if you haven't signed up to Patreon, I know there's not many weeks left, but you can still got the opportunity to do it. There'll be no payments taken in June anyway, because obviously there'll be no content on and stuff like that. But link in the description below if you want to sign up. And thank you to everybody that has already done that. I'll leave it there because there's a game week preview video to go. Did I say I was going to make a game week preview video? I think I did. It'll be out later. I don't know what time. 6, 7, 8, something like that. Look forward to it. Until then, hope you enjoyed this one. Hope it was helpful, and I'll speak to you soon.